of the SEC championship just weeks ago, but boy, did we see a much different game. A game that began as a field goal fest in the first half turned into a real opportunity for Georgia QB Stetson Bennett in the second, throwing 2 touchdowns, completing 17 of 26 passes for 224 yards. But the nail in the coffin for Alabama came in the form of a Bryce Young pick six with 54 seconds to go. Stetson Bennett, thankful the D, able to undo his costly turnover just seconds before that.
I mean, I just knew there was going to be no way we were going to let a turnover like that stop us from winning a national championship. There's no way. I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't going to be the reason we lost tonight.
You lost this game against Alabama in 2017. How much sweeter does that make this win?
Well, that one will be with me for a long time, but this one will be with me for much longer. I'm proud of the University of Georgia, the support we get there. A lot of credit to Alabama. Coach Saban, they had a lot of injuries. They lost Jameson Williams in a tough situation, but our kids kept fighting and never doubted.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
These two guys that are sitting up here, they're not defined by one game. These guys played great for us all year. They're great competitors. They were great leaders on this team. I just want to thank them for that and let everybody know how proud I am of these two guys.
Okay, not only did Georgia look like a different team this time around, but so did Alabama, actually. They were without receivers. Jameson Williams, he was out the entire second half. Also, John Mechie. So that being said, Keyshawn, was last night's win more about Georgia's quarterback Bennett Stetson or Bama's injuries?
I think it was more about Bama injuries. When you look at those injuries, Kirby Smart alluded to it. You just mentioned it. No Williams, no Mechie. On top of that, you go to the secondary side of things. You had Jackson in replacement for the starter there at the cornerback position. So when you lose some of your top players, it's very difficult to overcome that, especially at the quarterback position. Your top 2 wide receivers for Bryce Young did not finish the game. In fact, one of them didn't even start the game.
Yeah.
And now you lose your top dog in the game. So it's very difficult for you to start to get off to doing things. You start pressing like Bryce Young was doing. You start taking chances like Bryce Young was doing. It's a different football game. There's nothing taken away from Georgia and Stetson Bennett at all. He had a tremendous season. I cannot take anything away from him, but I have to also say, just like Kirby Smart said, they had a lot of injuries. The injuries are key when you play professional or collegiate sports. You've got to have the depth, and clearly Alabama ran out of the depth. That's one of the reasons they lost the football game.
Well, Key, I'm over here laughing because if anybody's got depth, it's Alabama and it's Nick Saban. You heard when the season started, NIL, he's talking about, man, my quarterback's getting paid. We have guys who come here. Jameson Williams transferred from Ohio State, to come and play. So if anybody's got depth and knows how to develop players, it's Nick Saban in Alabama, number one. Number two, what I heard sounded a little bit like, better yet a lot like, excuses, right? Well, this guy got hurt and that guy got hurt, and that's the reason why Alabama lost. When in all reality, we've seen injuries happen before, and we've seen Alabama overcome certain injuries. We saw Alabama overcome an injury to John Mechie in the SEC championship game, and that's when Jameson Williams stepped up. We saw Alabama overcome an injury in the Iron Bowl when Jameson Williams, not an injury, but a player being out. Jameson Williams got called for targeting. Now all of a sudden he was out for the second half of that game. We've seen people step up in the Alabama uniform. And so for me to come and say that the reason that Alabama lost, or better yet, the reason that Georgia won was because of Alabama's injuries, I'm not buying that. What I'm buying is that the reason that Alabama lost that game, better yet, the reason that Georgia won that game wasn't because of injuries, wasn't because of guys who weren't there on the defensive backfield at corner or at receiver. I think the reason that Georgia won this game was because of Stetson Bennett, the same Stetson Bennett who all over Twitter people were calling for him to be benched. Not just this game, people have been calling for him to be benched anytime one of Georgia's games got close, right? Anytime the game was close, any little mistake that they saw, people were calling for this guy to be benched, for the 5-star recruit, for the 6'6" quarterback, for JT Daniels. Yet week in and week out, the guy who started the season third on the depth chart in Stetson Bennett came in and proved everybody wrong. And he did it in the biggest moment. So for me, this Georgia team that found a way to win their first championship in 41 years, first time that Kirby Smart's beating Nick Saban in his last 4 tries, even though they've been up every single time in the second, third, or sometimes even fourth quarter. For me, this win is all about Stetson Bennett. Why? Because in the SEC Championship game, we saw Stetson Bennett struggle, yet in this game, we saw Stetson Bennett shine.
Well, but Stetson Bennett was remarkable, but so was Georgia's defense. I mean, look at them compared to the SEC championship game. They weren't able to hit Bryce Young even once. This game, they were able to hit him 10 times, hurried him on, I think, about 26 passes, and really were able to improvise, adapt, and they played all 4 quarters. So you got to give some props to the D as well.
But here, look at this. Sam and Charlie. Okay, Sam, you're saying that they overcome injuries, they have the depth. Yes, historically, they had depth, but even that depth that they have, when you have lack of experience and you get thrusted into a lineup, you then cannot play at the same level that Michie played at, the same level that Jamison Williams. Played at. You're missing something. Jackson, who did they target when you talk about Stetson Bennett? They went after the corner Jackson. They targeted the weakness of the team. So if that is your strength, they certainly wouldn't have done that. When you talk about the SEC championship game, you mentioned that all of a sudden Jamison Williams had to step up. He was missing in the national championship game. He wasn't there for Bryce Young to rely on. So therefore, Bryce Young felt as though he needed to take all of the pressure and put it on his back to force throws, to try to do things. And on top of that, you got to catch the damn ball when it's thrown to you. So those individuals that was put in position to make those plays, they were not catching balls. They were butterfingering them, trying to figure out how to move their hands a certain way to catch the footballs. I take nothing away from Georgia. I think Georgia deserved the national championship, but much like Charlie said, the defensive front was reckless. They were getting after him. He started to panic at times to get the football out because he didn't feel comfortable in that situation. Had nothing to do with Bennett. Zero. He gets credit. Yes, it's not the 6'5", 215-pound quarterback. There's no question about it. He gets all the credit in the world. Like I said at the start, from beginning to end since taking over, he's done a tremendous job. But let's not just turn this into it is the reason they won is because of Stetson Bennett. Let's not do that.
Sam, you're killing me.
Key, I love you. I love you so much. Let me tell you why I love you, because you're talking about pressure. You talking about, man, well, Bryce Young, he's got all this pressure and his receivers are down and facing all this pressure. This is the Heisman Trophy winner.
Doesn't matter,
Bryce Young. This is the dude who set records week in and week out.
It
this
doesn't
dude
matter.
has felt pressure. You saw the Iron Bowl, Key. You saw the Iron Bowl. He got sacked 8 times in the Iron Bowl. That was more sacks than he's been sacked all season. Yet in the last minute, no, he didn't. He only had one guy. He had John Metchie. Yet in the last minute, the last 59 seconds of that game, we saw Bryce Young overcome pressure. Don't come at me with, well, it was too much pressure for Bryce Young. Number one. Number two, you talked about receivers. You said, man, those receivers dropped passes. And yes, passes were dropped by the Alabama receivers because there were some backups in there. But let's not forget, there were some backup receivers for Georgia as well. George Pickens, he only showed up for the very beginning of that game. You saw that big catch that he had. But A.D. Mitchell, the dude you talked about who caught that pass, the touchdown on a backup, he also was a backup. He started the season as a backup. He was not supposed to be the guy. Georgia had a ton of injuries at receiver as well. And so both teams were playing through injuries, with injuries. Both teams were playing with backups. And so let's not sit here and pretend that Georgia was just completely healthy and they had everybody and all these things and they just beat a depleted team and just act like Georgia, A.D. Mitchell is just this superhero. He stepped
I didn't
up
start the
big,
show
number
off.
one. And number two,
Sam,
yes, the defensive backs were injured.
Sam, I didn't start off saying that they had injuries. Their head coach, Kirby Smart, started off saying they had injuries. So maybe he's giving an excuse to his old boss. I don't know. All I'm doing is stating the facts, man. That's all I'm doing. Yes, Mitchell may have been a backup, but in that particular moment, their backup was better than Alabama's backup. Let's be honest.
Absolutely. And we could absolutely be honest in that scenario, but you're also saying that the question was, okay, what was the reason, right? The main cause, the important reason as to why Alabama lost, or better yet, Georgia won. And you said that the reason that Georgia won this game was because of Alabama's injuries.
I believe if Alabama was at full strength. I believe if Alabama was at full strength.
But isn't that the sign of a
it would have been a different game. We saw the injury of Jamison, right? If he didn't get injured right there on a big chunk play, you don't think they would have went down there and put 7 on the board?
Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But in all reality, Key, Alabama has been at full strength health. Well, no, hear me out, because you're laughing, you're smiling, which is all good and all dandy. It's a new year. It's 2022. So,
yes, it is.
In all reality, Alabama has been healthy all season long. Throughout the regular season, Alabama was healthy. But man, you look at the matchups, like opponents, you look at the way that both these teams were playing, both at full strength. Georgia was dominating, and to put the words of Nick Saban, Georgia was the most consistent team. That's what Nick Saban said. I want to talk about what coaches said. Nick Saban said Georgia was the most consistent team all season long. Anyone like you who watched college football knows that. Alabama had its ups and its downs at full strength. So we cannot assume that if everyone were going to be healthy in this game, that Alabama would have just rolled up its sleeves and won this game. I believe there was a lot of pent-up anger and aggression. Like, if you want to do anything, Key, give credit to Kirby Smart. Give credit to this Georgia team. Give credit to the last 37 days where they got embarrassed in the SEC championship game and they were out of condition. They said, we're going to run extra. We're going to wake up early. We're going to do all these things to find a way to win. If you're going to give anybody credit, and you don't want to give it to Stetson Bennett, give it to the Georgia football team, and then give it to Kirby Smart, who has been saying all season that you are either elite or you are not. Sometimes the chips fall where they may. In this scenario, the chips fell with an injury to Jameson Williams, and I hope he gets healthy soon because he is a baller, a beast, one of the best receivers in college football. That's where the chips fell. But let's not just sit here and assume that, well, because all these guys were injured, right? Cameron Latu, tight end, he stepped up big, even through injuries. And so I know that it sounds good to say that Alabama would have won if they were at full strength, but Vegas, who had Alabama's underdog, Will Anderson, who should have been in the Heisman conversation, their star defensive player, who kind of said we were an underdog. The whole team was like, man, we need to play our best ball, and they didn't play their best ball, whether because of injury or because of they were not ready for the moment. And Georgia, for all season, was prepping for it, and they found a way to get the job done.
Well, if I don't have my 2 top wide receivers in the national championship game versus the SEC, where Alabama ran shop on Georgia, it's going to be a different game. It's just going to be a different game.
But also, let's just give some props to Stetson Bennett, you guys.
Nick Saban has 7 rings,
yeah,
bro.
okay,
So
we got to move on, but let's
do
quickly give some props to Stetson Bennett, okay? He's a walk-on quarterback. He also was he was getting so much criticism leading up to this game. Everyone asking the question, does he have what it takes to win a national championship? Yes, my friends, he absolutely does. Okay, Sam, we're saying goodbye to you for just a little bit, but you'll be back because we have to move on to kind of the bad news of yesterday, depending who you ask.